living entities with serpent bodies like mine, they do certain things that serpents do, and they suffer in a certain way because they do certain things the way the serpents do. And Jiva Goswami is commenting, even great souls who are discriminating, and they know the difference between matter and spirit, and they still do things on the platform of the body instead of the platform of the spirit. So, you're not exactly abdicating responsibility, but it's material nature, and you're in charge of material nature, so not like you're to blame. He's not blaming Krishna for his getting that body of a serpent, but the remote controller, Krishna, is in charge of material nature, and material nature is awarding the body according to his past guna and karma. Now, it's a nice long story. I think I narrated it before when I was discussing verses on this chapter. How Kaliya became Kaliya. It's a long story. But he was an envious Brahmana. So he got cursed by another Brahmana because of his envious nature to become a serpent. He became a serpent. His enviousness continued from a previous enviousness. So it wasn't changed by getting a serpent body. It was just continued. And he shouldn't, how did he get a body of a Brahmana if he's envious? Well, we don't know how that took place. But somehow, some offense or something, and now he's in a Brahman's body who's envious. And those who act according to that, those in the human form of life, who act according to that, such tendencies, and don't take shelter of Krishna and overcome such tendencies, we're responsible. Even you're an elevated Brahmana, or whatever. We're responsible for our choices. And the lower nature, well, what can I do? I have this lower nature. We're responsible. There is an option. The option is take shelter of Krishna and overcome that lower nature. And that's what's being said. Jiva Goswami's commentary. You alone have that potential. This is of removing my conditioning, my envy, my being influenced by the serpent body that I have. We have bodies, and according to our bodies, we have a psychophysical nature. Of course, we are to engage according to our psychophysical nature. And we are to dedicate that Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam to Rishikesh, because he's Hari, he can take away that conditioning, that is to say, the tendency to just identify with the body and go with the flow. That was one of the philosophies I ran into when I was in college, go with the flow. Very popular at the time. Kind of like a Western version of Taoism, go with the flow. But no shelter, no transformation. Just you're part of material nature and go with the flow of material nature. Or, if it feels good, do it. Hedonism, go with the flow. How do you overcome that hedonism or tendency to the senses are awarded by Prakriti to facilitate desire? So we'll do the Buddhism and Vaishnavism thing. Buddha says the root cause of suffering is desire, and the Vedas say the root cause of suffering is ignorance, which causes ignorant desire, which causes ignorant activity, which causes suffering. So remove ignorance. Easier said than done, because sharira avidyajal, the body's a lump of ignorance. avidyajal. And the senses are network paths leading to death. And then rebirth. And then another body, and then another. But Krishna is very kind. He's given us a means of overcoming that cycle. And material nature has an infallible grip. No one can just state it. No one can change those laws of nature except one person, Krishna. And he doesn't change the laws of nature, he just grants us pardon, amnesty, despite our misdeeds. Now, we have to become deserving, and deserving means somehow yadrichaya, somehow some mercy comes, and instead of saying no, or let me think about it, we say, I'll try it out. With some faith, I'll try it out. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'll try it out. I have some faith. So we some trust. Bhaktivinoda Thakur teaches that this, even in the beginning of the sadhana stages of bhakti, there's some ruchi. Otherwise, you can't keep going. And if done properly, with faith and proper submission and following in the sadhana bhakti activity, that taste can grow. And that is to say, further shelter, and then thus further cleansing and further awakening of taste. Gradual. The gradual process is for those who want to be again in their relationship with Krishna and above their swabhava, instead of leaning on the crutch that says, what can I do? I've got this nature. I get angry, or I get lusty, or I get greedy, or I get whatever, envious, and then I suffer, but what can I do because I have my nature? The human form of life, specifically, is meant to go on the other side of that. We can say it in different ways. Human form of life is meant for self-realization. Human form of life is meant for liberation. But what is that liberation? There's different ideas of what liberation is, but the Bhagavatam idea of liberation, very clearly expressed. Svarupena vyavastati. Svarupa. This is, different than the material swabhava. It's in our spiritual form, svarupa. Engaging in activities of our spiritual identity, in our spiritual form. We're not there yet, but that's what Bhagavatam is teaching, according to Shukadeva Goswami. That's what the Bhagavatam is teaching. And as that awakens, it carries us beyond our conditioned tendencies. The serpent tendency for Kalias, it's gone. It's gone. And how did it happen? The touch of Krishna's feet upon his head. Now, the serpent, Kalias was like an intense character. There was the serpent that was swallowing Nanda Maharaj, and Krishna just touched the head of the serpent that was swallowing Nanda Maharaj. I mean, gosh, that's pretty intense. And just by touch, he was relieved of the curse, and the Gandharva it came out, but Kalias was really intense. Krishna had to smash his heads again. He was at the one time delicately dancing, and another time smashing, and his one hood would come up to bite Krishna's body. Smash and smash. His body was smashed. His heads were so many heads smashed. He was a hard nut to crack. Now, I know some people that are also hard nuts to crack. But inside, deep inside, there's Krishna Prema. There's a different than the envious tendency, there's a tendency to want to please Krishna and nothing else. That's it. That's deep inside. And then there's coverings. And so Hari can take away the coverings. And devotees have that confidence, that trust, that faith. Maybe not a mature stage of taste in the activities of serving Krishna, but some faith and good association so we can carry forward. And primarily, Srinvatasva Katha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. By the Punya Shravana Kirtana, the transcendental punya, not the other kind, is awakened. The good fortune is awakened by the Shravana Kirtana, Punya Shravana. Ridyantaksto Yabhadrani Vidhunoti Surit Satam. That's our Bhagavad Dharma process. So we have a number of learned personalities here, headed by, I don't know if all of you know, probably most of you know, Vasu Ghosh Prabhu. Here today and gone tomorrow, heading back for Ahmedabad or Baroda, for Janmashtami. So, would you like to add anything, share anything? Here comes Bhakta Mike.
Wow. I think the bad qualities that were enunciated here by Kalias, the interesting word in that connection is dushchaja. Tyaja means to give up, and dush is difficult.
Very difficult.
So human beings have been imbued with a certain type of intelligence that animals don't have. Although Kalias apparently is an animal, not a human being, but he was able to speak, and that it's a kind of a conundrum here, because when we say that human beings have a greater intelligence than animals, and then we say, well, Kalias is an animal. How could he enunciate this philosophy when he didn't have sufficient brain power, being a dumb animal? But the only explanation you already gave, Krishna touched him, so therefore he could speak. But in human society, we see that there are different types of people. And some of them are like snakes. Many of us are never touched by those people directly, But we read about it in the news that, so many people were killed here, so many people were killed here. But Chicago is famous for killing. But over here, you never see it on this part of the town. There are gang wars going on, right? Some part of Chicago. So there are,
in some of the neighborhoods where the devotees live, they hear shootouts.
Right. But this kind of behavior, bad behavior, is all over the world. It's not just in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's in India. For instance, now the Kashmir is a flag. Actually, that place it's all Vedic culture. Originally, it was all Vedic culture. But envious people, in the name of religion, are killing innocent people. I don't know, did Kalias actually kill anyone? He poisoned the lake. Yes, the cowherd boys died, right? And Krishna revived them.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
So this kind of,
The birds flying over, they would.
they would die. So this kind of poison that Kaliya represents, because it's not, we believe that the story is true. I'm not saying that it's purely an analogy, but there is an analogy there. And all we can do as devotees is to try and purify ourselves. But one thing that I think should be said is that there's a need for Kshatriyas in the world to deal with those envious elements who won't give up these bad qualities. Dushjaja. They can't give up. You know, they're killing innocent people wherever it is, whether it's the south side or the west side of Chicago, or whether it's Syria, Iraq, Kashmir, or wherever, or in India. I mean, 11 years ago in India, we had people come into Bombay and just kill 200 people, right? You know about that.
Yes.
And hey, you know, I know they bombed a train in Bombay once, these kind of envious people, and one devotee's brother died in that train. So, you know, we know people who have been affected by this envious type of behavior, snake-like human beings. And that was in the 10th canto, which is what you're reading now. There's so many demons that Krishna killed.
Mm.
So the demoniac mentality is ancient. It's not something new. It's part of material nature, swabhava. And there are those who are envious by nature like snakes. And so how to deal with them? We're preaching to people to become good, sattvic, and to give up these bad qualities. And that kind of a teaching is required. But on the other hand, there are people who are being taught in schools, right from the childhood, to kill everybody. It's pretty crazy. Anyway, I guess I shouldn't talk too long now. Thank you for giving me Bhakta Mike, Maharaj, but this is just some of my feelings on this. Hare Krishna.
Behind you, 2 hands up.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Pastor Ghosh. I wonder if Kalia, in his form of a snake, was paying some kind of karma of prior lives, if it's recorded somewhere in the Vedic literature.
Yes. You want to know who he was in his previous life? That's your question? I touched on it, but in his previous life, he was a brahmana who was engaged in meditation high on a hill or mountain. And another brahmana came into that same territory and found it just really lovely, and found a brahmana engaged in meditation and said, "Hey, I'd like to live here too." And he said, "Sorry, Charlie, this mountain isn't big enough for both of us. You're going to have to go somewhere else." And brahmana number 2 said, "What? Don't you know that Vishnu has created everything and he's the controller of everything, and how can you say this is yours? What kind of learned person are you?" And they had, some brahmana dispute back and forth. And so brahmana number 2 said, "You're not a brahmana, you're envious, just like a serpent. You should become a serpent." And he became a serpent. Doesn't say. Not like poof, he went away and became a serpent. Doesn't say. But it happened. There's more details, but that's Puranic description. I forget. Do you remember what the other, there was a counter curse. One becomes a serpent, the other becomes a something. Huh? Crocodile. Thank you. And he got delivered too. So, is he under Puran?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have two questions. One, is there any explanation as to why Krishna did not kill Kaliya?
He's, I don't know of an explanation of why, other than his sweet will. No, when Krishna kills, it's liberation, and when Krishna did what he did with Kaliya, it's liberation. So it's the mercy is just different forms of mercy.
Right.
But why Krishna decided this instead of that, I don't know of any explanation. Vasu Ghosh?
Isn't it because Kaliya had some devotion, whereas the other demons, they were incorrigible? Like, Vasudev Pondrak, Krishna cut off his head. Or what was the other one? Shishupal, thank you, sorry.
Dantavakra.
Pardon?
Dantavakra. Dantavakra.
Dantavakra, so many, Shishupal,
Yeah.
etc., etc. So they or Jarasandha, they had no desire to surrender at any stage, whereas Kaliya was chastised and then he recited these prayers of surrender.
Well, here's another.
And his wives were also devotees.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, which is, it's not, I don't know it's stated in scripture anywhere, but his wives were fantastic. They were so devoted. They didn't get, their heads jumped on by Krishna. But yeah, because of that connection with these exalted wives, Krishna did what he did. But it's not always just like, Bali and anyway, go ahead.
So that brings me to the second question, is an appreciation of Krishna's mercy. But as that appreciation, it's always nice to know more. Krishna in Vrindavan killed so many demons.
That's mercy.
And they all got some form of liberation. Then
Putana got, look what Putana, my goodness.
Yeah.
But there was some little bhakti, I'll be the mother.
Yes.
And kill him.
Then there is Nalakuvara and Manigriva who went back to their positions within the realm. Then there is Nriga the king. Who
There's all kinds, he's
the
not a
serpent.
cookie.
So it's, although the serpent had the touch of Krishna, he became a Gandharva. It's not necessary that he was liberated he was liberated from the curse maybe. So,
Well, Kaliya became devotee.
Yes.
He became a devotee. Just like Nalakuvara and Manigriva. They became devotees. They went back to their position, sons of Kuvera, but they're now Shuddha Bhaktas, without all the pride and all the other stuff, with the same opulence and the same this and that, but without the pride.
Thank you. That answers that becoming a Shuddha Bhakta is far more important than the liberation per se.
Yeah. So, and why this instead of that was your initial question. Who can say? Krishna saw something. There's even if he sees the wives are super fantastic, he could have killed.
And that's the beauty of being in the relationship with Krishna.
It's in his hands.
Yeah.
And that's nice. Super nice. Srivalika usually have questions.
Guru Maharaj, you were giving the example of Kaliya and the other serpent that was swallowing Nanda Maharaj. And so Kaliya in verse 56 is expressing, because I'm in the body of a snake, I have these tendencies of envy, anger.
Yes, yeah.
And there's also this other living entity that, very quickly, just by the touch of Krishna, gets rid of, is purified of those same bodily tendencies.
Yeah, well, so So Kalias was deeper, and the other serpent was lighter. So Krishna didn't have to smash him; he just touched. You know, proportionate to or appropriate to each one of us. His mercy is ubiquitous and appropriate for all of us. Okay. Acharya Nishna.
Just on Nityananda Prabhu's question, one of the speakers brought out the point that the Nagapadnis prayed to Krishna, please spare our husband.
Uh-huh.
And he was drawing out, connecting that when we get the mercy of a devotee, on our own endeavor, we can't.
But that came after Krishna could have killed him.
Yeah, that's true.
He's already spared them. He not only spared him, he's given him, mercy that no one gets. How they're marveling at how and why. It was already done, though. But they had their nature, and Krishna knows their nature, whether they speak it or not. Same for us. Srila Prabhu. Oh, one more.
In the purport that you read from the Bhagavad Gita, there was a sentence that said, living entity is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyments. And we are also, in these verses from Kaliya, hearing about how when one is born with a certain body, there are certain tendencies.
There are
certain tendencies that accompany that body. So the doubt about, we're born with these tendencies, and then we're impelled to act in certain ways that determine our suffering and enjoyment. Almost like we're caught in this vicious cycle.
Yeah,
Although there's always...
Exactly. You can't break the rules. The vicious cycle rules. You can't break the rules. We're caught. And so?
Although there's always the free will.
Yeah.
To break out of that.
Well, free will needs some mercy, right? Hey, I think I'm going to do a U-turn. That's a beginning. And then?
So, instead of having that kind of an attitude, where we want to get rid of our tendencies, having that attitude of, hey, I want to do a U-turn, this dependence on Krishna.
Yeah. That's part of that's the yoga process. I mean, Arjuna is in this bewildered state, and Krishna, please instruct me. Until then, it was there was the submission, and I want to do a U-turn. But without the submission, even the instruction isn't going to have any effect. And then there's degrees of submission, and therefore there's degrees of effect. Okay, Srila Prabhupada.